Welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam Smith, and today I'm extremely excited to pick things up where we left it off in the showcase for Kingdoms Forlorn, Dragon, Devils, and Kings from Into the Unknown Studios. Now, for those out there that are new to the channel or have just come into the showcase right now, you're going to want to check out first the Vision and Outpost phase video, as well as the Delve phase video, and you'll see that inside of a playlist that I'll place in the top right-hand corner right now. Be sure to watch both those videos to understand where we're currently at as we now head into a Clash phase. And as we're following along with the Learn to Play guide, there's going to be a transition that'll occur after your Delve phase is complete, which was the tail end of the last video. And now we're going to be transitioning into the Clash phase, which means we need to set up for a Clash. But there's just a couple things I want to mention before we make that transition. Now, within this upcoming Clash, we're going to be using the Ironcast Dead, which are known as a common monster that you can encounter within the Principality of Stone. It's worth mentioning, though, for this tutorial, which I'm covering, the particular Clash has some slight setup differences than what you might have found in the Principality of Stone Codex. So if you've already kind of looked ahead into that codex, you're familiar with it, you'll notice there are some differences to what I'm doing here. But again, that's because we are following along with the Learn to Play. Now, it's important to know during your campaign, once you're outside of the Learn to Play and have completed it, typically a single expedition will include 2 clashes: an exhibition clash during the 8th Delve round, which is also known as the 8th hour, or when prompted by gameplay, could happen sooner or later than that, and also a full clash, which happens during the last round, which is known as the 16th hour. Now, these two types of clashes will play out exactly the same with one exception. The exhibition clash, you will add some generic single wound cards to the wound stack from the get-go, which basically means you'll have to deal with less wounds to win the fight overall, making it quicker and easier. And that's exactly what's happening here in the tutorial clash. It's considered an exhibition one. Now, something you're not going to want to forget is the fact that squires now entering into the Clash phase are considered knights for all intents and purposes for effects that would impact knights or conditions that would impact knights. It's worth mentioning, though, there are certain cards you'll come across, like a condition card, for example, like Distracted or Panzer Parasite, where it will literally distinguish between a knight and a squire in terms of the effects that will occur to each of them. However, if it doesn't distinguish this individually by knight and squire, any mention of knight in terms of effects through the Clash phase is going to impact not only the full knights, which you just saw in previous shots, my 2 individuals that have full dashboard layouts, but it will also impact the foolhardy squire and the eager squire on the right. So both of these squires now known as knights within the Clash phase. With those mentions out of the way, let's now go ahead and set up for the tutorial Clash. The very first step of setup for the tutorial clash is, of course, setting up the battlefield. So we have the game board unfolded here, and you can see a number of different watermarked areas around the board, so ensure you have room for everything. Now, on the right-hand side of the clash board, you'll see there's no cards that have watermarked areas off to the side, so this side will have some extra space. Along the bottom here, we're going to have the monster sheet, signature and routine, AI deck, BP deck, wound stack. On the far left-hand side, a number of mini decks for the Mortis decks, condition deck up there, monster traits here, and across the top, you'll see across the top a number of watermarked numerical spaces for the BP cards. And this side of the game board also has on the right-hand side an area for terrain cards as well as the Knight pool. You remember this from the Delve phase when we gathered some tokens. Those will end up in the Knight pool a little later on. I've adjusted the battlefield board to ensure we got space on all sides, including the most important area down here for the monster sheet, which we'll be referencing throughout the fight. And you'll see over here the Mortis decks. Let's go ahead and place those. Let's start by placing the Minor, Major, and Grave Mortis decks. Now let's place the Condition deck in its slot up here, and a little later on in this setup, we'll be grabbing some specific cards from that deck in order to use for the tutorial. The final Mortis decks you're going to need is Judicium and Massive Peril, and the Massive Peril actually comes from Judicium deck being split up in a specific way for this tutorial. Initially, the only 2 cards part of the deck are going to be You Died and You Live, so go ahead and take those 2 cards, flip them over, shuffle them up, and place them here. The other 4, you're just going to place in the Massive Peril area. These could be added through game effects later on. With those decks now set up, we're going to move on to the dice. Make sure you have your attack dice and your power dice nearby. And be sure you have your Knight tokens available for this tutorial battle. I've used the ones that are specified in the setup instructions. There are more Knight tokens than what is shown visually, but if we need any additional ones, we can simply grab them from the main box. Now, every character inside of your party, Knight or Squire, is going to have their boards and everything in front of them in terms of their components. You do not reset any stats from the Delve phase into the Clash phase. However, you do start the Clash with all unused technique cards in hand, and of course, you're going to flip them over to the C side of the card, which is shown in the top right-hand corner. So here's a quick look at both of my Knights that came over from the Delve phase, as well as both of my Squires, which again, inside the Clash phase, both these Squires considered Knights, and these are exactly how they were situated in the Delve phase at the very end, and exactly how we move into the Clash phase with them. It's now time to turn our attention to the enemy we'll be facing, in this case, the Ironcast Dead. You'll need to grab their Monster AI sheet, which has a left-hand side and a right-hand side, and when you connect the 2 together, you'll see the artwork in the center is complete. Let's place a signature and routine card in the slot. And as you likely remember, in a previous story entry 0008, we were told to take a negative AT token, which is going to be placed on this enemy dashboard. Now it's time to build out the AI deck for the Ironcast Dead. For the AI decks, you're going to find for the Ironcast Dead that there are cards AI1, AI2, and AI3. You simply just need to have AI1 in this slot right here, so all those cards will move down to here. 2 and 3 decks will sit off to the side for now. Next up is the BP deck for the Ironcast Dead. Simply break them into their 3 specific decks based on their backs, BP 1, 2, and 3. Now within the BP 1 deck, we need a card to represent each of the 8 mob enemies. So we're going to take out Bone Squire BP 1 card. There's actually 2 of them. So you want the one with ID that ends in 498. And we're going to flip that single BP 1 card face down in slot 1 at the top of the Clash board. Now go ahead and take the remaining BP1 cards, there should be 5 of them, shuffle them together, and then randomly grab 2 BP2 cards and shuffle them into the same deck. With these 7 cards shuffled together, as well as the one we've already placed in slot 1 up top, that's a total of 8 cards. With the BP deck now shuffled together, go ahead and draw one at a time, filling in from slots 2 all the way through to 8. With those BP cards across the Clash board in place, we're now going to take the remainder of the BP2 cards we have and all of the BP3s, and we're going to place them off to the side of the Clash board. For now, I've got all the extra AI and extra BP cards in decks off to the side. Now, I do want to mention something specific about the numerical values of those BP slots. Now, the numbers on these slots across the top of the Clash board also correspond to the numbers on the mob base rings, which you'll see as we further set things up. So this way, you're going to know when attacking a mob miniature 1, for example, on the board, that you must wound the BP card on the 1 space of the mob track. And during a clash, you might be instructed to spawn a new monster, placing a new BP card from the BP deck onto this track. And when placing cards on the mob track, you always start from the leftmost space. You now need to take 2 activation tokens, 1 AI activation token and 1 signature activation token, an AI and S respectively, placing them on the 2 leftmost BP cards on the mob track, ready side up. That's all there is to it for the activation tokens. But it is worth mentioning, in the future, you'll always want to follow the order written on the monster sheet under the activation symbol. So for example, you can see that right here. With our knights ready and our enemies ready, it is now time to populate the Clash board. From the terrain cards within the game, which are easy to find based on the terrain keyword at the very bottom of the card, find the column 1 and place it in the top left-hand corner of the terrain area. Now you're going to want to find the 8 column tiles and place them on the Clash board in the indicated spaces you'll see in just a moment. Let's get those columns into the correct positions. With the columns now in place, let's go ahead and get our 4 characters, miniatures or standees, miniatures in the case of the 2 knights I'm controlling, and again, the 2 squires, known as knights in the Clash here, will get their standees in place. The starting positions for the tutorial battle are already preset, but normally after the learn to play, you'll be able to choose where you place each knight or squire. Moving on to the Ironcast Dead miniatures, we're going to attach them to their base rings. As you can see, the Ironcast Dead are now in their numerical bases, making life easy to see these from distance. We're not going to situate them exactly as it states in the learn to play. And feel free to keep the other Ironcast Dead miniatures and their bases off to the side. The Ironcast Dead miniatures are now almost surrounding our party from all angles. We now determine the individual in the party who's going to get the priority target token, and this is going to be the individual with the most passion. Now, mistakenly, I didn't actually uptick my passion by 1 in a prior video, so I've actually gone back and made a pinned comment entry in that, because when we hit story beat 3199, it told us to give a passion to Kara, which I did not actually increase, or maybe I did, and somehow this bumped back down to 0. So it should be at 1, and so this correction now ensures that she has the most passion across the 4 and lines up with the learn to play, and she's going to gain this token. And throughout gameplay, that token is going to change between the different individuals of the party depending on who has the most passion. Moving on to other game components, we need to ensure we have armor tokens nearby. I'm going to go ahead and place these in with these other ones. As Learn to Play instructs as well, also make sure you pull out the Panzer Parasite cards and just place them nearby. For now, I'm going to place them on top of the condition deck. Now, do you remember in the delve phase video when we used technique cards during the delve, which had a warm-up effect in the top left-hand corner that gave us an opening token? Well, now those opening tokens are going to end up in the night pool. In addition to those 2 opening tokens that I received in the delve phase, I also got a break token, but it doesn't mention this inside of the Learn to Play for the Clash setup. So for now, I'm going to place it outside the night pool, mainly because I want to follow along with the Learn to Play in terms of what it is going to introduce for game concepts without adding in anything extra until it's necessary. But I don't want to forget about the fact that I did gain this. In regular play, all these tokens would be in the night pool. We're going to move on to the wound stack next, but before we do, I want to talk about the AI deck and the BP deck. Now, if you have space available below here, you can have your AI deck 1, AI deck 2, and then AI deck 3 in a column underneath of the AI deck watermarked area. Same for the BP deck. I could place BP 2 here and BP 3 underneath, but again, because of spacing, I've placed them off to the right. But just to be aware of that, that's how you want to situate them in separate decks. And now let's talk about the final step of setup for the Exhibition Clash. You'll want to find a single wound card, which also has a double wound on the opposite side, but make sure the single wound is face up and place it in the wound stack. As there is a wound in the wound stack, this is going to inherently make the combat easier and quicker for this Exhibition Clash, as you always fight until you reach a certain wound threshold. So until you deal a certain number of wounds as dictated by your enemy's level, this single wound is a running start for the tutorial. And those are the steps to get your Exhibition Clash within the Learn to Play guide all set up. Clashes are fought in a sequence of alternating monster and knight rounds. The monsters usually go first. During the monster round, the monsters perform attacks against you equal to the number of their activations. And these attacks are going to require you to either draw and resolve an AI card or resolve the signature card. During the night round, each knight and squire will take their turn in any order and perform 1 movement action and 1 combat action. Now let's touch on movement, distance, and speed. We'll start things off with movement. All movement in the game is cardinal, in other words, north, south, east, and west. There's no diagonal movement. And range within the game is also counted in the same way. Knights and squires in the game have a speed attribute, which tells you the maximum number of spaces you can move with your movement action. So in other words, you can always move fewer spaces than your movement allots, but never more than that. And any remaining movement is lost the moment you end your movement. You can't save it up and use it later. Now, monsters in the game are not bound by the speed attribute. They can move any required number of spaces during their attacks, even if they would target you from the other side of the clash board. As you likely expect, they only ever move as many spaces as they need to reach adjacency with their target. But as a general rule, mob monsters cannot move through or end their movement on a space occupied by a knight or squire. If there is ever more than one equally viable way of drawing a path, such as during monster targeting or movement, it's up to you to decide which one to choose unless stated otherwise. You get to take the one that hurts less, and I definitely recommend you do. Let's quickly touch on monster levels and traits, because monsters have varying levels you can find in the large numerical values in red and white. Each level, of course, will be designated by a larger number, but as the monster becomes stronger, not only does its basic attributes increase, like its to hit or wounds or AT. As an example, the level 1 Ironcast Dead has a +5 to hit and 7 wounds, but if it goes to level 2, it becomes 6+ to hit and 8 wounds to take it down. But it's not just things like its basic attributes that can increase level on level, it's also going to add traits, which you can see an example of this off to the right-hand side for level 2. Something like Necrofusion can dramatically change the monster's tactics and sometimes even the rules and conditions of the clash itself, so you have to be on the lookout for that. Also remember to apply all the trait changes from previous levels as well. So when you face a level 4 Ironcast Dead, you apply all traits from levels 1 through 4. Let's now move into the monster round, and each monster has its own large monster sheet and includes all the basic information about that monster you need to know. Now, we're inside of a clash where level 1 stat line is what matters at the moment, so we're going to focus on that. And you'll also note there's no traits at level 1 we have to care about. Now, as clashes begin with the monster round, the Ironcast Dead will act first, so the first activation token rests on Mob 1. And Mob 1, again, is easy to spot on the clash board because the base shows a 1 on it, so that mob there is going to be activating. Now, the token that is on Mob 1 is an AI activation, which means normally you draw the top card of the AI deck to determine the behavior, but because we're inside the Learn to Play, things are a bit scripted, so we're going to be specifically going into the AI deck and pulling out Rusted Slash. Now, here's what an AI card looks like, and this is the Rusted Slash card. The level is up in the top left-hand corner, so it's a level 1. You'll see below that how many evasion dice you'll be rolling, which is 3, and below that the evasion difficulty at 8+. Now, the card on the left-hand side here has 3 different sections in red: targeting, move and attack, and after attack. So the targeting section here is going to give you your targeting instructions. The move and attack gives you your move and attack instructions, and the after attack effect is shown at the very bottom as the after attack. You then have your attack type, and in this case, it's just an attack, and it shows that in the keyword just below the title. And then finally, on the right-hand side there, you'll see React in blue. These are known as a window of opportunity, and they're denoted with a hand or pointing icon. Now, before we go ahead any further with the AI card, I want to touch back on the activation tokens. We have an AI activation token on Mob 1, and we have a signature activation token on Mob 2. So what do these mean? Well, the AI activation triggers an AI attack, which is happening through the card we drew just moments ago. The next one on Mob 2 is going to be an activation that triggers a signature attack, usually making you resolve the signature card. And of course, you'll see that happen in the very near future. Now, overall, during a mob clash, mobs are going to activate starting with the first activation token on the leftmost space of the mob track, as you've seen. And then once finished resolving a mob activation, you're going to flip that token to the spend side and move it from that mob's BP card to the first BP to the right without an activation token. So once we're done activating slot 1, the token that's there, the AI one, will flip over and move over to slot 3. Now, keep in mind that each token will only activate 1 card per round. When you move a token, it is considered spent. Now, if there's no valid BP cards to the right, instead you're going to place it on the leftmost BP card of the track without a token. If you happen to defeat a mob while there's still an activation token on the card, which of course is a good benefit, you move the token to the next BP card without a token, but you don't flip it, and at the start of the next monster round, all spent activation tokens are readied again. Final thing to note, and it's important for strategy, is if there's only 1 BP card on the mob track in general, you place all the activation tokens on that single card, so the mob can activate multiple times in a round. It is important to note, though, that the initial order in which the activation tokens were placed, in the case of this game here, AI first, and then after that, the signature activation, they could change over the course of the clash. All right, so getting back to our AI activation, with our AI card, the Rusted Slash, each monster attack starts with determining its target. And as you saw on the AI card moments ago, you're looking in the target area of that card to check each command line from top to bottom, one by one, to see if any knight meets all of its criteria. And as soon as you find a targeting line you can resolve, you stop and resolve it. So here's a look at the 2 lines you can see right here. The first one says closest knight in front, and second says closest knight in sight. Now, both Kara and Rerolls meet the requirement of being the closest knight in front. Also, there are no terrain tiles in the way, so there is no question of whether the dead can draw line of sight to either of them. However, Kara has the priority target token, which in the case of ties always becomes the target, so Kara is going to be the focus here. Now, if 2 or more knights are equally viable targets and none of them is a priority target, in other words, the token doesn't apply in that situation because both of them might have the same passion level, the players can choose which of them becomes the target. And in the horrible situation where a knight with the priority target token dies, you pass that token to a living knight with the highest passion. And during the targeting portion of gameplay, you might see the keyword knights being used. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the clash, in the clash phase, squires are knights. So again, all considered knights for the party. However, saying that, a targeting line on a card may specifically refer to squires. So only in those cases should squires only be targeted. Now, adjacency in the game is very easy to understand. Basically, it's going to be your north, south, east, and west based on the size of your miniature. So in the case of my knight here, this one that I'm pointing at the moment, basically going off to the west, to the east, to the north, and south are going to be the 4 different positions where adjacency is valid. Now, let's say that I had a a mini in this equation that was taking up 4 of these spaces on the board, well, then adjacency is going to be these 2 over here, these 2 over here, these 2 up top, and down below, well, one is taken up by terrain, so not there, but this would work. The terrain in this clash are columns. They are destructible, so you can actually break them, and of course that would open up the space, but at the moment, they are an obstacle, and they're also obscuring. So of course, something like obscuring is going to mess with line of sight. And line of sight, as you'd expect, is a mechanic in the game used to determine whether a knight has an unobstructed view of the monster and vice versa. So while a knight must have line of sight to the monster to perform an attack, the monster must have line of sight to the target if the command line requires it to be in front or in sight, which is definitely the case right here. Now to check for line of sight, you draw an imaginary straight line from any corner of any space occupied by the attacker to any corner of any space occupied by the target. So let's say hypothetically, an example here, we had mob 1 making an attack and was drawing line of sight to Kara here. So basically, from any corner of that attacker to any corner of the target, there's multiple ways I could make this happen. So we definitely have line of sight, no problem whatsoever. But if things were changed up, like we had a column, for example, sitting in between the 2 of us, in this example, if mob 1 was trying to target Kara here, by drawing from a corner to the corner of the target, it would be running along the side of this column, and so that has no line of sight. However, if they were positioned like this, the attacker can draw a line of sight to the target as it just clips the corner of that obstacle, and the obstacle does not block line of sight from that side or even this side, for example. Now, it's important to note that obstacles never block line of sight to themselves or to miniatures that are on top of them. And finally, miniatures themselves do not block line of sight. That's a very important one to keep in mind. So in all other situations, line of sight can be drawn. But always keep a close eye on the terrain cards and also game effects that might introduce things that do block line of sight. Now, getting back to the AI card that we drew, we were looking at the closest knight in front, and we knew we had a tie between a Squire as well as Kara. Kara had the priority target token, so she's going to be the target. But in a case where you're going through the command lines and there is no valid target, and in those cases, a monster will perform a routine, and the routine is usually a stronger negative effect, but it can sometimes be an attack as well, and these cards are resolved instead of the normal activation, so as a rule of thumb, you want to avoid triggering a routine whenever you can. So we know mob 1 has a target in Kara. We're going to move on from targeting to move and attack. Now, Rusted Slash is a regular attack, which means the monster must be adjacent to the target to perform it. As we know, monsters have unlimited movement, and they're always traveling along the shortest possible path to their target. Mobs in particular cannot move through other game components like obstacles, knights, and other mobs unless it specifically says you can. Now, the monsters are moving in cardinal directions, as we talked about, so basically it's going to be zigzagging its way towards Kara. So it's going to move and turn to face towards Kara, move and turn again, and a final movement and a final turn to be facing her. In Kingdoms Forlorn, you do not roll to see if the attack hits, you roll to see if you could evade the hits in time. Now, the player controlling the targeted knight rolls a number of evasion dice equal to the evasion dice value on the AI card. So you can see a 3 and evasion dice black icon there. So you might be thinking you're bringing 3 black evasion dice into the equation. That's actually incorrect. You will have a crit white die as one of them always. So if this value actually was just a 1 inside of there, instead of any of these dice, you'd just be bringing a white die in. Now, if you have a 3, you're always bringing one of those as a white crit die, and then you fill out the rest with the black dice. So this is the pool of dice that I should have. Now let's go ahead and make the roll. We'll see what happens, and then afterwards I'm going to rig it in order to line up with the learn to play. So let's see what we get. We're looking for anything that is 8 or higher because that's going to allow us to evade. Now this was a very rough roll. If I had gotten all 3 of these results as part of gameplay, that would have me losing a 3 vigor across my character, which is a pretty rough hit. However, you can go ahead and spend a heat in order to re-roll the evasion dice. On your knight's dashboard, you'll find a blue column, which is your heat column, and there you can go ahead and uptick that if you wish to re-roll. Now, let's stage things to line up with the learn to play, so I'm going to go ahead and say that I actually landed these 2, which were successful evasions, but this one was not. And so because one of them was a fail, and I didn't choose to re-roll it and try to pass, this is going to ensure that I take a vigor hit of 1. And you'll also notice another icon, which is kind of a long icon of a red and white symbol next to the vigor icon. This is known as a peril check. Now, if I was going to go ahead and take the vigor loss that I would have gotten from my original roll, it would actually be 3 vigor loss, dropping me to 7. But because I'm following the staged approach, I'm just losing 1 here, dropping me to 9. And because we took a vigor loss as part of that attack, and there's this icon right next to the -1 vigor, which ties to the peril arc, we take a look at where our vigor currently is, which is a 9. So a 9 is in this row here, and we're drawing a minor level card. So that's going to come from this deck right here, and normally you draw the top card, but for the purposes of the learn to play, we're going to grab the specific one it mentions. And the minor mortis card, which is going to be gained by Kara, is going to be the Vision of the Grawl. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, I definitely mispronounced it moments ago for sure. And it says you may gain +1 passion. So we can choose to do this. This is something we have an option to do. Again, if we choose to increase the passion, we are definitely keeping the priority token on Kara. Now let's choose to do it because it's not just about this token, it's also tied, as you can see in green here, this passion symbol for Wildling. This is going to give more options for her as she goes up the tiers of passion. Now we're almost done resolving this one. The final thing is the after the attack, which says Gang Up 3. And to resolve Gang Up 3, we're going to move the Ironcast Dead up to 3 spaces toward the target. But in this case, the monster won't move because it's already adjacent. But then we're going to move the targeted knight the remaining number of spaces, which is 3 in this case, or until adjacent toward another closest monster along the shortest path. Now we're going to move Kara into adjacency with the Ironcast Dead 3, and we're going to treat this as involuntary movement. It's worth mentioning, if we were already adjacent to another monster, we would have suffered knockdown for Kara instead of being moved. So Kara is now adjacent to Mob 3, and afterward, the source of Gang Up always moves adjacent to the target. So Ironcast Dead, who was the source of Gang Up initially, now closes in on Kara. Now, with that resolved, let's quickly go back to the dice roll that we did earlier on Evasion. I want to talk about the crit die and some results of rolling. Now, in the game, there are 2 types of dice. You have the D10s, which you saw me roll for an example with the Evasion, but these are custom D6s, and we'll talk more about these a little bit later on. Now, it's worth mentioning when making a roll in the game on the D10s, whenever you get this symbol right here, which is a 10, it's always considered a success. And of course, on the opposite side of the coin, if you happen to get a 1, it's always considered a fail. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the D10 is white, and this is known as the critical die, and that die is used to simulate strokes of luck as well as unexpected failures. Now, whenever you perform an attack or an evasion roll, you must always roll a single white crit die, as I mentioned prior, as part of your dice pool, and if you roll only 1 die, the critical die is the one you roll. Now, if you roll a natural 10 on the crit die, which means without having any kind of rerolls as part of the equation, when you evade, it becomes a crit evade. And this has no inherent effect, but it can activate some additional abilities on your gear cards. Now, speaking of rerolls, remember moments ago when I said I could have used a heat in order to do a reroll? Well, whenever you perform an attack roll or an evasion roll or even a virtue test, you can reroll any number of dice by raising your heat value on the track by 1 for each die you decide to roll again. So, dependent on how many dice you want to reroll, that heat is going to tick up the track. You have to declare all the dice, though, that you want to reroll before you perform any of these rerolls, and each die can be rerolled only once per roll and must reroll any chosen dice all at once. Now remember the peril check icon that we saw right here in this row? Basically, we would only do the peril check in this case if we lost at least 1 vigor, but if you ever see this peril check as part of gameplay without the loss of vigor, you have to make the peril check. However, there are some other situations around the peril check that is worth mentioning. You can find that info on page 27 of the Learn to Play. Now that we've finished resolving the after attack effect of the AI card, and that card has been resolved, we're going to go to slot number 1. The AI token is going to flip over to the opposite side, and it's going to be moved to the next slot available on the track, which is going to be slot 3. After that, the attack ends, and we place the resolved AI card face up in the AI discard pile, and if the AI deck ever runs out of cards, you just simply shuffle the discard pile to form the new AI deck. Now, we're not done the monster round just yet because we still have a ready activation token on the mob track, so the monsters will continue to act. There's exactly 1 more token, so another Ironcast Dead will perform its activation, and this is a signature. And so in this case, we're going to be going to the signature card, which is found at the bottom of the clash board, and this is going to be for mob number 2. Now, even though Kara and Rerolls are within the same distance from Mob 2, when we consider the number of spaces the mob needs to move to reach the target via the shortest possible path, Rerolls is clearly the target of that attack, and that's a good thing because we can learn how knights and squires are going to differ in terms of dealing with a monster attack. Now, it's important to note that squires do not roll for evasion. Instead, they draw the top card from the metal deck and check hits evaded. Revealing the top card of the metal deck, we're going to take a look in the top left-hand corner for hits evaded, and it's 2 compared against the evasion roll of 3, so that means 1 hit is getting through. So my eager Squire over here is going to be losing 1 vigor down to 9. Now you'll also notice that there's a peril check right after this -1 vigor, so if somebody loses a vigor, they're going to have a peril check, but Squires don't fall into this category. Squires will only have a peril check if their vigor reaches 0 or below. And unlike full knights, which actually have a peril arc that you can check against the column to see what type of card you'd be pulling, if you get 0 or below over here on vigor for a Squire, and you have a peril check that you have to resolve, you're going to be pulling a Judicium card. And so if that Squire eventually gets to vigor 0 or below and hits a peril check, they're going to be pulling from this deck right here, which we know from setup is a live or die situation and can potentially become even more skewed towards death with more of these cards making it into the deck. Now, Squire Evasion rules will scale dependent on the value inside of the evasion die icon. So up to 4 on this evasion die, which basically means up to 4 potential hits could be coming your way, you draw 1 metal card to try and evade those hits. Now, if it ends up being a 5 or higher, you're drawing 2 metal cards off the deck. If it ends up being a 7 or more on this die, then you're going to go ahead and draw 3 metal cards off the deck for your Squire. And if the evasion difficulty is 11 plus, you're going to subtract from the hits evaded value overall to a minimum of 1. The Squire can also gain +1 heat in that blue column to discard the result of a card and draw another. Now, if you have an effect that would grant you evasion rerolls, you can do this without gaining heat. Now, there are a couple other nuanced Squire Evasion rules that if you want to check them out, you can find them on page 28 of the Learn to Play in the top left-hand corner. The card that was used in order to try and evade is now discarded into the pile. It's worth mentioning after any action, if there's a critical chance or critical miss card in the discard pile, you shuffle the metal discard pile into a new metal deck. And to resolve the final portion of the signature card, Gang Up 3 is triggering. Gang Up 3 applies to the mob, and that's going to have it move adjacent, which it already is, to the Eager Squire. So, because this is already adjacent, we've got 3 to move with the Eager Squire to the next closest enemy, taking the shortest path possible. That's going to place the Eager Squire right next to mob number 8, and after making the move, now the original mob, mob number 2, is going to move adjacent to the Squire. And that's going to resolve the slash card fully, but unlike the AI card we resolved earlier, it's not going into an AI discard. That card, which we just used, is a slash. It's sitting in the signature and routine slot. It's going to stay right there. But what is going to change is that signature activation token up here is going to flip over and move to the right. And that, my friends, is how you activate the monsters within a monster round. We are now moving on to the night round, and you're free to take your turns in any order you like to make the best of the tactical situation at hand. The knight's turn consists of 1 combat action and 1 movement action. At the start of every knight's turn, that knight should resolve the refresh step, which includes a heat refresh and a card refresh. Now, to resolve it, you simply lower your current heat by the amount equal to your knight's heat refresh rate, which is found on their card. So Flight Shredder's heat refresh, for example, is a 3. We currently have 2. We can drop this down to 0. You now can return a number of technique cards from the cooldown area of your knight board, where X is your knight's card refresh rate. And you can find that right here. It shows a card with an arrow down of 1. So if we had a card sitting in the cooldown area off to the left, and you'll find the cooldown area on the left-hand side of the dashboard, we have no cards in it, but if we did have a card here, we could bring it into our hand. Now, any cards or all cards inside the delay area will now shift to the cooldown area. Again, doesn't apply here, but if you did have some, you'd move them now. Now, for those of you that watched my Dell phase video, you'll know I used one of my cards here for Flesh Shredder, which was sitting in the cooldown area. Now, at the very beginning of this Clash setup, I went ahead and refreshed my entire hand, knowing I'd have the whole hand available going into this Clash anyway. But this would be the time that that one card sitting in here from the Delve would be refreshed, thanks to the one card here showing on his character card, allowing me to have all 4 as I do. So all of that is covered inside of the refresh step of the Knight activation. So even if you're going ahead and activating a Squire, known as a Knight in the Clash, you're not going to have to worry about technique card refreshes whatsoever, but they will still do a heat refresh, which is shown right on the card of 1 here for the Foolhardy Squire. Now, we're not doing that just yet, but I just want to mention that there is something to do in that refresh step when the Squires activate. But let's continue the activation of our Knight Flesh Shredder here, and he's got a combat and movement to use. Now, it's worth mentioning across my knights and my squires, all of them need to be adjacent in order to pull off their attacks based on what they have to use in combat. So we're going to need to get Fleischhüter up close and personal with mob number 1. We're going to have to move, and he's got a movement value of up to 4. Now, when playing with others around the game table, you have to specify where you're going to end your movement before you actually make your move. In the case of a solo player like me, you already know where you're going to end up, so basically you just use your allotted movement or up to that movement in order to get to that destination space. And it's entirely possible that you run through a number of terrain effects or other game effects that might have some things that trigger along the way, so just ensure that you do that as you move along. And it's important to know that you cannot move through obstacles, as we talked about before, and you can't move through miniatures or other standees of any kind. Now let's quickly touch on knight tokens and the knight pool, a very important and strategic aspect of Kingdoms Forlorn. So these are a special type of cooperative token which the players use to enhance other players' attacks when playing multiplayer. In other words, other people are on the game table. If you're playing solo like I am, then you're really just enhancing other characters in your party's attacks, and that's still extremely beneficial, and there's lots of strategy involved in it. Now these can help you hit and deal wounds, escape monster responses, and all kinds of other game effects. Now you generate these tokens by using weapon abilities through heroic arcs or as a result of other game effects, and the area you place the tokens in is what you see right here, known as the knight pool. Now, a key aspect of the knight tokens is that they're used during the following knight's attack, after which they're discarded regardless of whether that next knight used them. So in other words, when you're on your turn of one of the knights, they can generate tokens that end up in the knight pool to be used by the next knight that activates. So the activation order, the planning of which character is going to go first out of the knights, all of that ties into this knight pool and getting the best min-max situation out of your party. So what kind of tokens can show up in the knight pool? You can have opening tokens, and these tokens add +1 to the result of each attack die rolled during an attack roll. So that's huge. We've got 2 of them there. You'll see a break token I've got outside the knight pool, and that's because I just pulled it out as I gained it during the delve phase, but wasn't sure if the learn to play was going to touch on it. So for now, I'll continue to leave it out, but just pretend like it actually is technically in there. Now, a break token is going to allow the attacking knight to turn 1 broken cup symbol on a rolled power die into 1 power. And that broken cup in the bottom right-hand corner looks more like a chalice that's been chipped, and it stands for potential. So break tokens can turn potential icons into power icons. With Fleischhüter adjacent to an Ironcast Dead, let's go ahead and make a combat action to attack. We first need to declare our active weapon, and I'm choosing this right here. On top of declaring our active weapon, we're also going to uptick our passion by 1. The more you attack in the game, the more powerful you become, which unlocks new abilities from your heroic arc. It's extremely important to remember to raise passion at the beginning of every attack because your life will truly depend on it. You can see the benefits you'll get per the different rows based on what passion level you're at. Head back to the active weapon you selected for this attack, and you're going to find the attack die value in the top left-hand corner. It's a 1. Now, don't forget that each monster in the game has a to-hit value based on their level, and this level of the Ironcast Dead is 1, which means the to-hit value is 5+. Now, below the attack die in the top left-hand corner, there's a smaller number there. It says +0 in the case of this weapon, and that's known as a precision bonus. So this can be also a penalty, and this precision influences all dice rolled when attacking with that weapon, thus effectively reducing or increasing the monster's to-hit value. Also note the weapon power icon, which is just underneath of that numerical value we just talked about in red. In the bottom right-hand corner of the card, it'll let you know whether this is a one-handed or two-handed weapon. And for the knives card, this is especially important. As you can see in the ability box, you have a gated effect here in the middle. And what this effect means is that if you use the knives as a two-handed weapon, you can roll an additional attack die, which adds a little bit more into the equation, so it bumps that up to a 2. And the final thing you'll note on the card is at the very bottom, you'll see that all keyword, and that specifies the minimum tier at which the gear card becomes available to use. So knives are always available and cannot be lost, which is why they are denoted with an all. And of course, if you somehow lose the weapon during a clash, you can always have the knives to fall back on. So as we did with the evasion roll, when you're rolling for an attack roll, you're still using d10s, and one of them has to be a white one. So in the case of rolling 2 of them, it's going to be 1 white and 1 black. Let's go ahead and roll, but whatever we roll here, we're going to go ahead and stage afterwards per the learn to play. So let's see what we get if we were to keep this result. We got a 9 and an 8. That's a fantastic roll. And of course, remember that if you need to re-roll any of your attack dice, you can choose to do so by upticking your heat by 1 per die. Now, during a night attack, if I happen to have rolled a natural 10, which I did not, on a critical die, the white one, it gives you a crit chance, while a natural roll of 1 is obviously considered a crit miss. So a crit chance will give you an opportunity to deal a critical wound, while crit misses are only taken into account if there is a specific effect triggered by it on any of your cards. Now, if you hit with at least one attack die out of your pool, which I did on 2 of them actually, but even with just one, you reveal the BP card of the corresponding monster on the mob track. Now, if you get miss results on all your dice, so for example, to hit for this enemy is 5+, so if everything was 4 or lower, it's considered a full miss and your attack immediately ends and you skip all further steps of the attack sequence, but clear the night pool nonetheless, which is not good. Now, instead of my incredible roll of 9 and 8, let's say I hypothetically rolled a 3 and a 3, but I also had my opening tokens in the night pool, which allow me to add +1 twice over to both dice. So these 3s end up turning into 5s, which is going to meet the 5+ criteria of this character. Now, I had these hits regardless of the tokens, but you can see how you can use opening tokens to your advantage. Now, when you hit a monster like I just did, you get a chance to use some of your abilities. This happens after the attack roll, but before you draw a BP card, and this part of the attack sequence is called the first ability window. An example of an ability is Pushback that Flesh Rider can use once his passion rises to 4 or more. There is a whole bunch of keywords that you can use during the tutorial clash, and you'll also see as you go through the campaign yourself, which you can find in the back of the Learn to Play book and also referenced in the rulebook. Unfortunately, though, at the moment, I can't trigger any additional effects, so we just continue on to the next step. And since we've hit, we're going to reveal the BP card corresponding to the mob that was attacked, which is mob slot 1. And that reveals the Bone Squire. Now, here's an up-close look at that Bone Squire card, and the BP card shows the card level, which you can see with BP 1 here in the bottom right of that white section of the card. And then the armor threshold shows the rib cage value, and on this, it's going to be a 2. You'll also see monster responses on this card in the ability section here, wound and fail as an example, and also there's additional effects that can crop up at the very bottom of the card, which in this case says, while this BP is revealed, all knights have -1 precision. And there's also another optional effect towards the top of the card, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but it shows a power 1. Now, for our knight to successfully wound this thing, we have to generate power that equals or exceeds the AT value, and knives have a single red power die, meaning that our pool consists of 1 red power die per successful hit. So that's going to provide us 2 red power dice, which is great, and you'll also notice on your character or knight card in the bottom right-hand corner, another red power die coming into the equation. And also don't forget about the negative AT token or armor threshold token, which is sitting on the monster sheet, and it's going to reduce the armor threshold value of all Ironcast Dead BPs by -1. So instead of it being a 2, it's going to just be a 1, meaning we only need to do 1 wound off the power dice to take it out. Now, these types of situations can make you overly confident, so don't let the game fool you because mobs, and even at the same level, can vary a lot in terms of toughness. You never know what that BP card is going to hide until you reveal it, and it can throw all kinds of wrenches. Before I roll these power dice, I just want to mention if you want to learn more about modifier tokens in the game and how they change things, as well as more power, in other words, going up to higher levels of passion that increase how much power dice you're adding into the equation, you'll find that information on page 30 in the bottom right-hand corner of the Learn to Play. Now, this roll I'm about to do is known as a power die roll, and unlike attack and evasion dice, power dice cannot be rerolled using heat. There are, however, a number of other effects that allow you to reroll them. For example, in our case, we could have knights gaining 1 power reroll from the heroic arcs once they have 2 or more passion, and squires can redraw a power roll metal card by gaining 1 heat. So there are gameplay effects that will allow you to reroll these power die, but it's not as easy as it would be using heat through attack and evasion dice. So I'm going to go ahead and make the roll, and of course after the roll we'll talk about the icons that show up and also tweak things to line up with the Learn to Play, so we'll change the results so things sync up. So we got ourselves here a number of different things. So first off, this icon here is known as Hope, and basically there is going to be powerful knight tokens that will come into the knight pool later in the campaign that will allow you to turn Hope into power, which will be definitely beneficial, but as of right now I don't have that. Now the potential icon here, you know, I could turn that into a power with a break token, which I technically have in the night pool right now, and this sword right here is 1 power, and that 1 power is technically all we needed in order to make this wound. Now, per the learn to play, here's what it's telling me to set the dice at. So we got ourselves 2 power off this die, 1 power off this die, a potential hope, actually 2 hope in total. We can use the 1 break token we have in our pool, which technically would change the potential icon into another power. So with the break token, that's a total of 4. Without it, it's a total of 3. Now, it's important to note you might run into effects called Overcome and Overpower, and these essentially activate based on the difference between your total power and the monster's AT or armor threshold, and these are going to be, well, hopefully used to your advantage because you're going to need all the help you can get, as Kingdoms Forlorn is definitely a hard game. So I got 4 power off my roll, as you know, and -1 to the AT threshold thanks to this token, which makes it a 1, making it a 3 in terms of a difference. And it says here, overcome +2. So if we're 2 or more, we gain an additional power on top of it. So we've definitely dealt a wound, and so because of it, we go to the wound resolve here that says reveal the rightmost unrevealed BP. And the rightmost card is going to be slot 8. And that card is called Bone at Arms and has a value of 3 for its AT, and then it has a wound, fail, as well as a critical in the ability area of the card. And the Bone Squire card we just dealt with is now becoming a wound card, which goes into the wound stack. We have a total of 2 wounds up against the Ironcast Dead. And to win the clash against the Ironcast Dead, we need to have 7 wounds in that stack at level 1. At which point the rest of the mob will disperse. And if we would have rolled less than the AT value on the power roll we just did with the red dice, our attack would have failed to wound and we would have left the BP card in place face up. As Fleischhirter destroyed mob number 1, that miniature comes off the game board. Now every successful dealt wound enrages the Ironcast Dead, causing them to escalate. And as the clash progresses, monsters are going to become more dangerous and harder to kill. We now go through the AI deck and take out the first card that has the same level as the BP card that ended up in the wound stack. So we take a look at that card. On the opposite side is a level of 1. So let's go through this deck here and take the first one out that's a level 1. This one is going to go. With an AI level 1 card removed from the deck, we're going to go to the next level up, finding that deck, which is off to the side, the level 2 deck, shuffling them up and randomly placing one of them into the deck, shuffling this deck. As you can see, this is why it's called Escalation. So even though you're taking down the Ironcast Dead one at a time, that AI deck is becoming increasingly more difficult to deal with. Now, it's important to note that mobs are considered to be numerous. In other words, as soon as one dies, another one wants to take its place, and this is represented by spawning in the game, and spawning is a form of BP escalation, although it's usually happening outside of a night attack. And the example here that ties to what we just did actually only occurs at level 2. As you can see in the Necro Fusion area here, this allows for spawning, where we're currently at level 1. We don't have to worry about it for this clash, but keep that in mind that mobs will respawn at higher levels in some cases. After an attack is done, we clear all the tokens from the night pool, but we don't have to worry too much because we used every single token. Now, pulling up the Bone Squire BP card that we placed in the wound stack moments ago, remember when I talked about the Overcome +2 at the top there with a power 1? And I mentioned during the red dice roll that I had a power total of 4, and then I got an additional 1 because of the difference between the total power of 4 to the 1 AT, which was 3. So 3 is 2 or higher, so that means 1 power token is going to be added into the night pool, a nice benefit. So now the next attacking character in my party is going to gain a +1 power bonus to their total power, which is not bad. And that's not all, because now I can activate effects for my heroic arc for Fleischhirter, who has a passion of 1, which means we're currently at this row across the top. And based on the icons in here, I can leave an opening token or a break token for the next character. In this case, I'm going to choose to take an opening token. As a reminder, you have to clear the night pool after every attack, even if you fully missed and cannot leave any night tokens of your own. Also, remember to discard only night tokens such as break and opening, and there's a full list you can find in the rulebook on page 19. Now, resource tokens, like Fleischhirter's Fleisch tokens, which look like this, and there's actually one we currently have already as a resource token, which I'm going to add to the night pool, as that's where you place it when you gain it. I had it on his character card and left it there until we actually got to that part of the learn to play, so this is going to go in the night pool right now. And again, this would have normally been in there from the very beginning of the clash, and it's considered a resource. And resource tokens, like this Fleischhirter Fleisch token, as well as modifier tokens, are not discarded after a full miss, with the exception of temporary to-hit tokens. Now, also don't forget that technique cards can be used as a free action at any time between other actions in the night turn, unless there is a specified timing given on the card itself, such as when you are about to attack or during the second ability window. In those kind of cases, you can only use them according to the given timing. You may also deplete a Clash technique card to activate its exert effect instead of the normal card effect. And the Clash side of the technique card usually includes keywords. You can find them in the keyword list section at the end of this book. Certain techniques like the night roll include a specific symbol, and it means that the technique can only be used during a window of opportunity. So if you want to see that one specifically, we can just quickly jump to that right here, where you'll see that certain icon right there, window of opportunity. And that's going to do it for a full night activation. So let's give a Squire a chance to shine now. And we're going to go ahead with the foolhardy Squire. We're going to move her into adjacency with a mob. Now, I know she's got enough movement to get adjacent to a mob, so she'll use up to 4 movement to make that happen, and then do an attack, which means she'll be increasing her passion by 1. She's currently right here. We're going to have her head up to mob number 2. And at this point, technically, you go ahead and increase her passion on the track by 1, which I've already gone ahead and done. And then we're going to go ahead, remembering that Squires don't roll any dice, so for an attack, we draw from the metal deck. So here is the metal card that I got, and what we want to focus on is in the top right-hand corner where the die roll is shown at value 3. This is the precision of the roll, hypothetically. There's no roll actually done, but this metal card tells us we have a 3. We can use the opening token to bump this to a 4, and as we know from before, in order to hit a level 1 Ironcast Dead, we need a 5 or higher. I removed those other components out of the way that came from the prior attack, but it's worth mentioning I could uptick the precision of this even higher if I happen to have a green clue token on the Squire. I could actually spend a clue token that's on the Squire that is green in order to bump up the precision value, which actually would have met the criteria to hit. Unfortunately, I don't have a green token for clues on that Squire. I only have yellow. I'm going to choose to discard that metal card by spending a heat and drawing a brand new one off the top of the deck. Let's see what we get. Now this one has a precision value of 4, which is great news. We do not have a blue token clue-wise to be able to uptick that at all, but we do have the opening token, so that bumps it to a 5 using the opening token, and 5 or higher is a hit. So the heat usage allowed me to discard the green card I first drew to get another card out that actually got me a higher precision rating. I used the opening token with that for a total of 5 to get the hit. And as we got a hit on Mob 2, we flip over the BP card for Mob 2, and it's a Bone Squire with an AT value of 2 minus 1 off of the monster sheet, so it's a 1. You draw another card off the top of the metal deck to determine the power, and the top one was this one right here with a power of 2, which is pretty solid. And if we happen to have any green clue tokens on that Squire, we can go ahead and discard 1 in order to increase the power to 3. But we're not going to need to, and we don't have a clue token anyway. We also have a power token in the night pool, which I can use, so that's going to increase the power to 3, and 3 minus 1 is going to be a difference of 2, and it says here 2 plus. We're going to gain ourselves a power 1 for the next night on top of it for a token, and we definitely throw a wound, and this monster's been taken out. Now the wound condition on this Bone Squire says to reveal the leftmost unrevealed BP. And the card that popped up is called an Armor Head, and it actually has an instant keyword in purple there in the ability area that says to draw AI for the furthest mob. Now getting back to the Bone Squire card, this is going to become a wound, creating the 3rd wound in the wound stack. And it's also worth mentioning we did get the Overcome +2, which means we'll get a power 1 token in the night pool in the near future. Now before we go ahead and do Escalation, we have to go ahead and resolve that instant keyword on the BP card we revealed way up top. And it said on it to draw an AI card for the furthest mob, and this would be the furthest mob from the Foolhardy Squire. The furthest mob from that Squire is equally 4 and 5. They are 6 spaces away. The AI card that was drawn is called Rusted Slash. It's an attack, and again, the enemies have as much movement as they need to get adjacent to me, and we're going to the command line here for targeting closest knight in front. So for number 4 here, definitely going to be the Squire, which is going to be heading towards to make the attack, and we need to do an evasion roll of 3, but it's on a Squire, so the Squire will just draw another metal card. With an evade value of 3 for the Rusted Slash, against the Squire, we're pulling a metal card to see how many hits I can evade. And off the top of the deck, we got ourselves 1 hit evaded. So based on what we're seeing here for move and attack, each hit we're going to lose 1 vigor, so 2 hits got through, unfortunately, dropping our vigor on our Squire from 10 down to 8, which is a pretty nasty smack. There is also a peril effect icon right there, but that does not trigger for the squires unless they hit a vigor of 0 or less. And we now resolve a gang up effect of 3 after the attack. Now Mob 4, who this AI card is for, cannot move any closer to the current squire, and so the squire instead is going to move to the closest other enemy shortest distance. So that's going to be over here, 2 spaces to these 2. And this is why that gang up ability is so nasty, because now the source of the gang up, which is Mob 4, is going to move to be adjacent to the poor squire. At this point, that AI card has been fully resolved. And with that now resolved, we can head back to the escalation, where we're going to go ahead and take a look at the level card we took out, which is a 1. Find a level 1 within the AI deck and discard the first one we come across, which is this one right here. And then go up to the next level, which is the AI deck level 2, grabbing one of these at random and shuffling it into the deck. With the escalation now complete, let's go ahead and populate the Knight pool. We definitely landed the Overcome 2+ for the Power 1 token into the Knight pool. So that's just going to be flipped over at this point, and we have 3 wounds in the wound stack. And at the bottom of the Squire card, you'll see the Heroic Arc, and for 1 in Passion, it's going to be an opening token. And that'll be thrown into the pool for the next character to take advantage of. At this point, you are now knights and ready to take on the Ironcast Dead on your own. You'll continue resolving knight turns until all the knights and squires have gone, and then proceed to another monster round. If you're ever in doubt around the clash sequence or the rules around it, you can find more information on page 42 of the rulebook. When there are a total of 7 wounds in the wound stack, or when all the knights are dead, you proceed to the clash aftermath. If for some reason you lose, don't worry about it, you'll get another shot, as practice, of course, makes perfect in Kingdoms Forlorn. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope this helps you get the game off your shelf to the table, or if you're somebody looking into Kingdoms Forlorn for the very first time, that this showcase series is giving you a great idea as to what you can expect to find inside the box, and also help you get rolling that much faster. Once you've taken down the Ironcast Dead, you'll be moving on to the Spoils phase, which you'll find a couple pages towards the back of the Learn to Play. And I wish you all the best as your party journeys inside this massive campaign game. Now, if you're not part of our Discord server or the Facebook group, we'd love to have you in either or both those locations. We're talking about solo games, past, present, and future at all times. So no matter which platform you prefer, we've got a space for you. We'd love to have you join the conversation. If you enjoy what I do here on the channel and helps you get games off your shelf, learned, and to the table, or helps you to find that next solo adventure to go on, then be sure to find the join button on the homepage of the channel, where you can become a member to support the channel and see more videos just like this, as well as get behind the scenes access to things like early access videos, my schedule, live streams, and a number of other things you can't get anywhere else. Thanks again for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.